All right, guys, so we've covered the down block from the standing position, but given the changing nature of jiu-jitsu, we have to have the down block ready for when we're approaching seated guard. Say we jump in a time machine, we go back even 3 years, 5 years, before we had so many talented wrestlers starting to enter the sport, and before people really broke the unspoken agreement of bottom player plays bottom and doesn't come up, right? So typically, we could have approached back in the day, especially with IBJJF guys, because IBJJF guys rarely even had a seated guard. They'd be supine, and we could just walk in and start thinking about passing the guard. But even as jiu-jitsu progressed a bit more, we could even just walk into this position, because the most guys would do is shin on shin guard. But as jiu-jitsu's changed, if I were to approach a modern day grappler guard like this, he's just going to shoot on me and take me down. We don't have that luxury anymore. So that means a couple things. We still have to have a down block arm ready, and generally speaking, we should probably match head levels, so that if Placido goes to shoot now, we can down block and enter our front heads. So although people in your gym might not shoot regularly from the butt, you need to expect that in high level competition, because people are basically, it's no longer seated guard, it's seated wrestling. So a good example would be if you approach Nicky Ryan's guard, you should expect to be taken down more so than even Nicky to fall back and go for leg locks. So I want you to just keep in mind to have the down block ready. So try to match height, but say you're getting tired and you're coming up, do not remove this down block, especially if I start reaching. That's that it's going to post that and shoot for a leg. So really, I like to keep a hand on him, because that's at least going to keep Placido's butt grounded. And then if he shoots, we hit our down block and we enter our front head position. So this is more of a conceptual idea, but just because they're on their butt doesn't mean they don't have dangerous takedowns. I know a lot of grapplers that will take down high-level wrestlers from their butt because the wrestler's not expecting it from there, and he's not used to approaching someone like that. We can even see guys like Nicky Rod that shoot incredibly well from this position. So don't lose sight of the fact that we still got to have our down block arm ready. And in this scenario, we down block and someone shoots at the wrong time, we enter our front head straight away. All right, guys, so let's talk about when we go for a knee cut, we secure the underhook, because it's going to obviously give us the power to pin our opponent. But some of the styles of knee cut we can do, particularly explosive ones, as we knee cut, we're diving for the underhook. So, I mean, you would see Leandro Lowe and the Gi do this all the time. He hadn't established upper body control when he explodes a knee cut, but he gets it in transition. Obviously, when we're getting something in transition, we don't always get it. So if I were to do a knee cut where I were to secure the underhook on Placido, right? I'm exploding through. Placido's not going to be able to move. He's going to be pinned here. If he's trying to turn to front head or turn up to secure an underhook or anything, I have the underhook, so I have the control here. But when I explode for this sometimes, if Placido is keeping his elbow tight, I can miss it. If I stay on top, he's probably going to take my back here. He's going to come up and get behind me. So when I explode through for the knee cut and I don't establish the underhook, I've got to keep going. And as Placido chases my back by the underhook, he's going to expose himself to the front head. So as we explode through, he starts coming up, and I re-square to get myself in position to take the front head. So now let's look at it on the other side. I'm trying to get this as I explode through. I'm trying to secure the underhook. But Placido, being great defensively there, I miss it. So I get my hips away, and we circle back to secure our front head position. Again, elbow, chin strap. So sometimes when people have really tight guards, we can throw in these explosive knee cuts. But if you miss the underhook, be prepared to turn it into a front head. And that's a way we could really get to the front head. We could almost force it. You could choose to do these movements to see if that's going to encourage them to come up with an underhook. And in that sense, we can force a front head from a position where they're playing supine guard. All right, guys, so quite often when we apply a no-gi toreando, especially against typically wrestlers or MMA fighters that are always looking to get back up, if we don't hit a deep enough point and pin them, they are going to turn up into a takedown, right? So, say we hit our no-gi toreando, whether we run and build it up and throw them, or whether we pin them and cut an angle. If I stay at this sort of range, Placido can start coming up and turning into me for a takedown. And he can catch and potentially pull a half guard, or he can potentially even take me down. So we have to be ready for that. So as Placido starts coming up, we get our legs out of the way to catch the front head. Typically, if we get it to a deep enough angle, which is shoulder height, it's going to be much easier to catch the front head, and realistically, much tougher for Placido to even get up, and we can come straight to a pass. But what I want you guys to anticipate, especially depending on the style of grappler you're facing, wrestler, MMA guys, if you get around the legs, you're hanging out here too long, they're going to come for a leg. So you have to be ready to anticipate that. So we get outside and we can secure our front heads from here. But again, obviously in a perfect world, when we get around the legs, we're coming into pin, or we're getting around the legs to a shoulder depth, and then they have to turn so far. If Placido's standing next to me, if he's standing here, very easy for me to come up and start getting to a leg. If Placido's standing more shoulder level, I mean, how am I going to realistically do anything meaningful with this, right? So that's what I want you to think about with your depth of toreando. But again, it's not always possible to get the perfect depth. So if you do get around here, Placido doesn't really see the coming up for a single leg or even a single leg to pull half guard as a realistic option. But if he's here, he does. And we can be ready to catch those front legs off of these scrambles. So again, and I really have to emphasize this, because in my personal experience, if I face off against Placido's style of grappling, which is basically a base in pure grappling, if I get to a toreando on him, he's looking at foot pummel. He's not looking to come up. And that's something that people that don't train with MMA fighters or wrestlers don't get to experience. But you need to remember it. They're going to have different reactions based on their base in grappling. All right, guys, I want you to reimagine, redefine what you think of as a front head, right? So obviously we've got a front head from turtle, we've got a front head here, we've got a front head from tabletop, and we've got a standing front head, right? But really, when we have an opponent that's seated, we can secure the front head from this position. You might think when I catch a head here, I'm exclusively trying to hit a guillotine choke, right? But just as front head is a control position when we have a standard front head, we can use front head here as a control position too, right? So when I secure this position in rolling, I'm going to use a cross snap or a same side snap, right? So I'm going to step inside, cup the back of the head, hitting with the base of the hand, just like we were doing from our typical standing position. And I take a chin strap and I pull Placido's head to the same side as the front head position here. Obviously, we don't want to have it inside. That's where Placido's going to clear the position. So when we do this, we want to take inside position, but we can't even do this off a shin to shin. When Placido takes a shin on shin position, we can still hit the front head as a control. and I can sink my weight into Placido. So Placido is trying to move here. Very, very difficult. So our base control is always going to be elbow and chin strap. Whether we're taking a step from shin on shin, whether we get inside position. And again, we can do a cross snap, or we can really hit a same side snap. But you can see the way my weight's positioned here. I'm sitting on Placido, so Placido can't easily decide to stand up or shift gears here. So we're controlling elbow and chin strap. So that's our base position. And again, you guys can go for your typical guillotines, which would be arm in, high wrist or high elbow. And we will cover the finishing mechanics of that at a later point in this DVD. But for now, we're thinking control position and what is a front head. So you might be saying, if we're not going for guillotines from here, what can we do? So when we come in for a front head, we can actually pummel our chin strap hands outside. And we can take this little scoop grip here. And you can see Placido's head is trapped against my body here. If he tries to pummel it inside, it's going to be impossible. He tries to stand up, it's going to be very tough, right? We've got a very great pin position here. And sometimes when we hook this grip, we can basically step around and take the back. Why can we do that? Because Placido can't put his back on the floor here. Placido tries to put his back to the floor. He's carrying a weight on the top of his spine. And we can slide behind, preventing him placing his back on the floor. Obviously, if we were here and I tried to come behind Placido, he puts his back on the floor, we've lost the back. So with that grip, Placido now can't put his back on the floor. And we could potentially circle around. But of course, that's not all we can do from here, right? We could put his back on the floor and start to apply a knee cut. So if you guys pay attention to my right knee, we've got our elbow control, and I'm hipping in. And we can start driving them to the floor. Obviously, be very careful of the neck here, and I would allow it to slide out. But you can see, with Placido being a good okay, we could come straight through, start applying neck crank pressure. But again, very few events is that going to be legal at. I believe even ADCC, it is illegal to apply what is essentially a full Nelson, which is I'm applying neck pressure to Placido in a way he can't relieve it because I'm controlling both arms. It's another story, especially under the ADCC rule set. If Placido can turn out and relieve neck pressure, but if I control his right arm, now he can't turn out. So Placido is trying to move here. He can't avoid injuring his neck. Whereas if we didn't have the left arm, so we didn't have Placido's right arm, we can turn, we can start chasing the back. Another option from this grip is we actually let him take his head out early. And the only way Placido could do that is head inside. Basically the same from a chin strap. If he wanted to clear this, he could pummel his head inside. So when he does that, he's actually giving us an underhook and a tricep grip, and we can knee cut and land in a perfect knee cut position. Because again, he's giving us the underhook, he's giving us far side arm control. So say we take the chin strap, we switch it off to a more secure grip, but we're loose enough that he pummels his head out. Maybe we messed it up, or maybe we're just being kind. That's when we can use this grip to pass to a regular knee cut. Now another grip we can use from here is basically, it's like a variation between a half Nelson and we've got a single hook control. It's a way where we can pin our opponent, but we're not pinning them where they can't move at all. They can move in such a way that they give us the back, or they can stay in a position that pressures their neck. And the way we would do it is we're taking a guillotine grip, we're taking our reimagined front head, right? We're taking the scoop grip on the far arm. And really the beauty of this is that Placido can't get his back to the floor. So we can take this space away. I can throw myself behind his back here. And I want you to pay close attention to what I'm doing with my legs here. So I've ended up behind Placido and I'm back heel into my butt, and I've caught his right leg. So Placido's trying to wiggle around from here. It's going to be very difficult. And because his back isn't flat on the floor, it means we have a chance at back exposure. The best way to do this would be to replace our scoop grip with a regular underhook momentarily to start looking to take a Kimura grip on the far side. And again, because we have Placido control, we can start to do a chair sit. So I can leave my top hook with his leg trapped, because again, if I took that out, now we've just got a regular Kimura trap. But while we have this, we have another added layer of control. I can use my left foot, the outside foot, to sit up and put Placido on his side. And what I'm trying to do with my left knee, get it as deep under his back as possible. So that way when we can take the back, we can forward the far hip and start securing body triangles, right? But again, this isn't a technique to rush. This is basically using a variation of a half Nelson and a crucifix to prevent Placido getting his back to the floor. And if he can get his back to the floor, he can block our back take. So we're preventing that with these grips. Reimagine front head, scoop grip on the far armpit. As I switch hips onto my left and hide his back from the ground, I keep this leg as a hook. So we dive behind and I control his legs with my feet, and I've got diagonal control here. We've got control over the bottom leg and the diagonal arm. So Placido is trying to move here. He's stuck. What I don't want to do is be loose with my hips. Placido moves now. You can get shoulders back to the floor and come on top. So when we are applying this position, I want you to back heel and apply hip pressure. Now Placido tries to get his back to the floor, but he's wedged. If he really explodes that way as he was doing, he's just giving us his back. And again, that's why this position is very different to a full Nelson, because Placido, I've put him in a position where he can give me his back or he can stay in an uncomfortable position. Because again, look, he's wedged up, his neck's high. There would be neck pressure on him here. But if he really wanted to relieve it, he can just start elevating like he was just doing, and he can give me the bottom hook, and he can give me a seatbelt control, right? But again, some guys, especially in competition, are willing to tough this out. So if we want to force the back take and not just force dangerous neck pressure, we replace our scoop grip with an underhook. We come around and we look for this far wrist. If the wrist is far away, the best way to get it is to threaten a strangle. As he comes into the fend, we secure the wrist. We turn this into a Kimura grip. We keep everything tight. Placido still can't get his right shoulder to the floor. If he got his right shoulder to the floor, our chances of taking the back are very minimal. We need to bring him up more, and we can do that by keeping our inside hook, using our outside foot as opposed to step up and slide our knee behind his back here. What I wouldn't do from here is start to lay flat on my back. And Placido's going to be back to square one. Once we get up, I want you to fall to your far hip. So I'm pulling Placido cross body. And we can secure the back much easier and much safer than we have. So to summarize this position, I want you guys to think of exactly why I've listed the chapter this way. Is we're reimagining what a front headlock really is, redefining. So we have our typical front heads, but from here, we can take our front head. So obviously, like I said, we could go for guillotine chokes and try to finish from here. But again, it can be high risk. We had top position. We're jumping on a submission that might, if defended, lose top position. So what's another way we could change this for another layer of control? We go from front head to fast scoop grip. Doesn't allow Placido to hide his back to the floor. We could come behind. We could apply a knee cut with the neck in, which is going to be dangerous, but we can allow his head to slide out. We could take our scoop grip and leave enough space that his head can pummel on its own. So Placido starts thinking defensively, but of course, it's going to give us a regular knee guard. And then last but not least, a crucifix variation, where we dive behind them so they cannot prevent their back hitting the floor. If he's worried about neck pressure, he gives me the back. And we can take our back control. If he's not reacting, we can switch off to our Kimura style grips. We can get up high, jump the knee behind, switch to the far side, and we can attack the back. So again, it's just something to open your eyes to some extra possibilities for what we can do from these positions. Obviously, Jiu-Jitsu has been largely defined by the IBJJF, and really they're going to outlaw any sort of crucifix, neck crank style pressure. So given the amount of rule sets that allow these things in the modern age, we have a lot of new possibilities and new techniques we can use. And that's what we've seen there from a reimagined front headlock. So now we have the front head, right? We've gone over our entries to get it. Let's say we have our front head, but we've got it from standing. Maybe we just had a basic snap where we've landed in the front head from standing. So I want to explain something to you, and this is true for when we do rear body lock, basically turtle, rear body lock control. The higher Placido is off the ground, the less control I have, the less options I have, and the more options Placido has. If I take a standing front head on Placido, my submission options are very limited. I mean, if I were to dive front arm in guillotine, there's a good chance I just fall straight over the top. If I were to go for a high elbow guillotine, Placido can pass it off and get behind me. So our submission options are limited. Placido's defensive options have grew. But as we move through the styles of front head, and as we bring him closer and closer to the ground, our options increase. Placido's defensive options decrease. He also carries more of our weight. So when we look at this, think of it as a hierarchy, right? So although this is a front head, this is the weakest option, the weakest variation of front head. If I've got Placido into a tabletop, this is much better for me. It's more of a middle ground here. It's going to be much better for me to have Placido here than it is if he's standing. And best of all, it's going to be best if Placido is on his elbows and knees for a turtle front head. Because again, even from turtle, if I were to dive on guillotines, I don't have too far to fall, and it increases the likelihood that I stay attached, right? So when we're talking about standing front head, you want to be pretty conservative with your options from here. And we really want to make sure our grips are perfect, right? So again, when we take this chin strap, I don't want to have too deep a chin strap and my elbow comes to Placido, because now when the elbow passes, brings his head to the inside and he can take my back. Say I have a weak grip on his elbow here. It's going to be much easier for him to frame on my hip. If I just grab in the armpit here, it's hard for me to clear this grip. If I have the elbow, I can keep his elbow inside, like Placido trying to frame on the hip and grab an elbow post. Much, much less likely. So when we have this position, we want to make sure our grips are perfect. Priority one, this should be always a priority, is to return him to a level of control. Return him to a better level of control, right? So when I get a front head on Placido, I'm not hanging out and standing too much. I want to block his defenses, which is a hip post and a elbow pass. We've got to be preventing that, right? So really, if you can think about it with an elbow pass, what does an elbow pass entail? It entails him finding my elbow. So again, with the control, we're bringing that elbow back to us. Now it's further out of range. But if you think about a high wrist guillotine, right? For me to do that, I've got to bring my arm deeper. And the deeper this arm goes, the easier it is for him to pass the elbow off. So our options have to be conservative from this point. So when you control these grips, make sure everything's perfect. And your priority is just to return him to a lower level, whether that's tripod, maybe he gets back up here, and we can pull him down to his knees. We want to return him to areas but which we can control him better. And that mitigates our risk. So we have to play conservative from these positions. Although we will have some options from here that we're going to cover, I want you to think of those as, depending on the time left in the roll or the competition, right? We're going to save high risk moves for when we most need them. And that would be typically for the end of a match, perhaps even a match we're losing. We need to pull out a Hail Mary. Generally speaking, if we have time left in the match, we've entered a control position on them. Now we want to increase our level of control. And the way we do that is returning them to the mat. Every time they get back up, we return them back down. We keep that control. And that's going to really increase our chances of control, and that's going to lead to victory. But again, just because you've got a front head, it's not a good time to necessarily go straight for a guillotine or a high risk movement. We want to keep the control. And the best way to keep the control is with the fundamentals. Shallow elbow, and we're gripping their elbow so they can't hip post. And that's really going to increase our success from this position. All right, guys. So again, we were discussing the limited options you have from a standing front head. Again, the higher Placido is off the ground, no matter what it is, the harder it is to control. And that's going to be, you're going to see that theme, especially true throughout this whole video series, whether it's rear body lock or front head. We want them on the ground. We want them as low as possible. So their options are limited and our options are maximized, right? So a great option from the front head, and this is whether Placido's elbow passing, or whether maybe I just need to make something happen. Maybe I'm having a lot of trouble getting Placido to the floor. What we can do is we can use our hands on the elbow here to change levels as we turn out and get this elbow pass. Now Placido starts to square back up and we get a double leg takedown entry, right? So again, one of the best ways to secure a double leg would be to deal with these elbows, to get these elbows out of the way, get these hands out of the way so we get a clear shot, right? So a great way of doing that would be if Placido's relaxed here. If I could push his elbow out of the way, you've got a clear path with the legs. We're bypassing his down block, which obviously could turn into a sprawl or an underhook. So we create that off of the front head. So you can see here, as Placido starts to posture up, we get the elbow pass and we can secure a double leg entry. Now, we could even secure the double leg entry to realistically get to the legs. And we urgently want this to happen. We need something to happen. We're running out of time. By elbow pass, and we can get to engage leg locks or submissions straight away. But again, I will emphasize, priority one, return them to the ground. So when I get this front head, I'm wanting to get Placido to the ground, but it's not happening. Maybe he starts defending his own elbow pass, and we get our clean entry on the shot here. So again, really, we've got an elbow pass, but we're creating it out of a front head. So as I step wide, we get that out of the way, and we bypass. We bypass their lead arm, their down blocking arm, and that is a great option from the standing front head if you cannot return them to the mat. All right, guys, so again, and I can't emphasize this enough, any attack from a standing front head is high risk, but there are circumstances in which we need to take advantage of high risk moves, whether that be time's running out or you want to create a really cool highlight reel in competition, right? But let's look at using a Kosoto hook to secure the back. So we've got the front head here. What I really want to do is step and secure the back of Placido's knee here. Because once I've got that, I let go of the upper body, it pulls me to his back. I don't want you to think that I'm pulling Placido to a position where I can take his back. I'm holding him still long enough that as Placido starts clearing the front edge, he ends up behind. But again, high risk. This is an urgency sort of move. We need to make something happen, yeah? But it's, again, you take advantage of it being unexpected too. Obviously, I have to be careful. I want to make sure I'm controlling this arm, otherwise I'm giving him basically a free takedown here. So when we control the arm, we're not controlling the armpit, just like in all our fundamental sections of this product, is that if I control the armpit here, Placido's still got good elbow mobility to grab my leg. If I'm controlling the elbow, we can step behind and now Placido starts making a defensive movement and we can pull ourselves behind, right? Single face. We've got our front head, we've got good elbow control, we've got a good shallow chin strap, we hook. And it really makes it difficult for them to even take an underhook here because we're still blocking his elbow and we can end up basically bypassing their defenses and jumping straight to the rear body lock. So again, Kosoto from a standing front headlock to not move them, but hold them in position to allow us to move directly to their back. Guys, I just want to add on to the knee block, to the Kosoto hook to the back, is that, I mean, there kind of is a time and a place to use it, even though it is a high risk movement. So if you look at Placido's posture from the front head, right? Obviously, for me to return him to the ground, I'm pulling his head out and around. So the ease at which I could do this depends on his posture, right? So if Placido is leaning far forward like this, you can imagine it's going to be very easy to pull him down. And the further forward he is, the more space there is between me and his legs. But generally, when guys are recovering from front head, they're getting their head back above their hips, whether that's with a head pummel and they step and get their head high, or whether they're just trying to maintain the posture. So there are scenarios where Placido's posturing up here and I'm starting to find it difficult to control. But you can see that means his leg is much closer to me to hook. So you can create kind of a dilemma with this technique, right? And that is, if we got Placido's posture broken, it's going to be much easier to return him to the mat. But maybe you're dealing with someone that's a lot stronger than you, very strong neck, and you're trying to pull them and they're getting high posture, that leg's going to be much, much closer to hook. So rather than think of this technique in isolation, we want to build it into sort of a dilemma based on their posture. Low posture, easy to return, hard to reach the foot, hard to reach the leg to hook. As they start posturing back up, the legs become closer, the mat return becomes harder. So that's how you would incorporate the Kosoto to the back into more of a dilemma-based system.